How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Baldcafe podcast. This is season 3 in the mobile podcasting studio. I sat down with Max. We got right into his journey through hair loss. I hope it helps a lot of you guys out there. Let's jump straight into it. Grab some headphones. Enjoy this episode of the Baldcafe podcast. When did the whole journey start for you then? So can you remember the first time you kind of hair loss became a thing for you?
Yeah, I was working abroad and in the Middle East, and it was hot. So I shaved my head. And I'd had shaved head at university for 6 months or a year or something. And it was fine. People said it suited me. So I was like, that's so great. I'll do it now. And I sort of did it in anticipation of one day going bald, because both my grandfathers were bald. My dad's bald, although he doesn't think he is, but he is. And I'm like, I'm okay with that. You know, that's fine. I'll grow old gracefully. I'm okay with that. But so I shaved my head, and I've got quite dark hair naturally. So I had these balding patterns, and I just not expected it at all. I thought, it would sort of evenly thin out, and it would look fine, and people wouldn't really notice if I shaved my head now, and it would just gradually get thinner, and nobody would really notice. So I thought I was getting ahead of the game. I hated it. It was
Really?
awful. Well, I had such really dark lines and these patterns. So I grew it back, and I sort of forgot about it, because it wasn't sort of that bad.
Yeah.
And nobody noticed, but it was sort of like these sort of little things that you do. Like, it started out with, okay, well, I'll just sort of do that with my hair, and then nobody can see. Okay, that's easy enough. And then it's, okay, well, I'll have to have a shower in the morning, because otherwise I can't set the hair to go that way. Okay, that's easy enough. But then it's like, okay, well, I can't use a wax in my hair now, because it pulls more of the hair out. And then it's, okay, well, I need to get some more hold on this, so I'll use some hairspray. And then I stumbled across one of your videos, and I don't really know how, because I wasn't searching for hair loss treatment or bald guys or anything. It was just one of your where the dudes shave live,
Right.
And then I started looking at some of the other videos, and I'm like, oh my god, it's like they're talking about me, And I'd never really given it much thought, because these sort of things just crept up on me.
Yeah, they build over time,
They
slowly,
do.
right?
And I was just like, oh my god, what am I doing? Spending so much of your emotional energy on it. I ended up, looking at the weather before you go out to work, because I've got a bit of a commute up to London. And then, do I need an umbrella today? Do I need a coat? And then you'd get to the office, and okay, everything's still fine. And then you realise at some point that you're looking in every reflective surface just to check that everything's okay. And, logically to myself, I didn't really mind going bald one day, or so I thought. And so I was like, well, I need to do this. This is definitely the right thing. And that's sort of how I got to the point where I decided I was going to do it. So it was, it wasn't quick.
No.
Because it was quite a number of years. It didn't happen very fast.
Yeah,
for me
which is quite
once
normal.
I realised. It was certainly, I guess, 4 or 5 years from when I first realised I was actually, when
Something
I
was
first
happening
shaved my
there.
head, and I was actually going bald already.
So when you first shaved your head, you were out in the Middle East, you said. Was that with the whole baldness thing in mind, or purely just convenient haircut when you're out there, it's hot,
Yeah.
literally just for that?
Yeah.
And then you kind of thought, oh, well, hang on a minute, that's a bit different.
Yeah.
I guess you're expecting just even
Mm-hmm.
all over sort of thing, right? And that was the first time. And then your instant recognition of, oh no, that my hair's falling out, and then you were like, I hate this.
Yeah.
You can see it.
Yeah.
Grow it back.
Yeah.
Did you grow it back in the Middle East pretty quick?
Straight away.
Right. Okay.
Straight away.
Literally shave once, it's coming back. Okay, and then managed to it'll be fine.
Yeah.
It won't happen overnight.
Yeah, I put it to bed for a good few years.
Yeah.
Just not realising, but then these little behaviours were creeping up on me, and just didn't realise. And in the end, it was taking so much sort of attention away from other important things, and I was like, this just doesn't matter, I'm going to be bald, and I'm okay with that. You know, treatment was never a thing for me. You know, like, there's no problem if that's what you want to do.
Of course, yeah.
That was never a thing for me. And like I say, you know, you like walk down the street and you see a bald dude, and you're like, oh my, no one thinks, oh my God, he's bald. What an idiot.
No.
Like, people don't think that because nobody cares.
Yeah.
So I sort of intellectually knew that, but it took me a while to sort of marry up, you know, how I actually felt about that.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it took a while.
The emotional side of things is different to like logic, isn't it? You
Yes.
know, and how you act on those. So, can you remember any specific sort of times, or you know, you mentioned little things like just routines with getting ready or things like that. Were there any certain situations, like you said, you got to commute? Do you commute on the train, or
Yeah.
would it be like anything where? I mean, I'll just give you an example from my own. I remember being sat, you know, sat on a train, obviously, sat on the train, and someone had recognized, like a friend of a friend had recognized me, and they had filmed me, like from behind, like over the back of the seat, like in secret, and and sent it to the friend, and the friend sent the video to me, and they're like, "Oh, I can see you," you know, just like a weird joke. But my instant thought was like, "Oh my God!" Like they filmed like the top of my head, like exposed me, and even at that point, like no, you could hardly like really see what was going on, you know. Or I don't think someone's first thought would be like, "Oh, that guy's going bald." But after that, like I was not like paranoid all the time, but I would think like when there were people behind me, or I would be conscious of, you know, like, okay, I'll just slump down in my seat a little bit, so like, you know, you got some coverage there, and just little things like that. That was how those things crept up for me. Can you remember any specific situations where you would feel like uncomfortable like that, whether it's at work or, like I said, the commuting, or any times like that?
The thing that I remember is because I did quite a good job of hiding it, because it wasn't that severe, right? It's not like it was really, really thin. It was just thin in certain places. But what I never wanted is I never wanted people to think you're covering this up. You know what? We can see this, and we know what you're doing, sort of thing. Because that for me would have been like the worst.
Even worse, yeah.
Even worse. And I remember situations sometimes where, you know, the weather got particularly bad or windy or something. Maybe you didn't have a hat to keep everything in place, and you know, this was towards the end, like not far ahead of when I shaved it, and your hair would like blow, and you're like, oh my God, people are going to realize that actually I am going thin here, but that I've been trying to cover it up, and that for me was the worst bit, is like people realizing that I might be covering this up.
Yeah.
So I kind of just wanted to get ahead of that. You can get it shaved off and put it to bed.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was sort of what drove my decision.
Yeah, you knew where it was going to end, and you wanted to just like get to that point now rather than prolong it. I was exactly the same. Did you one of the things that helped me the most was unintentionally, like, just kind of venting a little bit about my frustrations with, like, you know, the fact I was losing my head. Did you ever like speak to anyone about it, or did it not get to that point for you?
No, I never had until I saw some of your videos, and I started trawling through like them all. And there was one, I think, like 10 tips or something to do.
Oh, like 10 steps.
10
yeah,
steps.
yeah.
And it was like, talk to people so they know. Like, so I did. So I started talking to people, and it was individually at first, rather than, you know, as a collective.
Yeah.
Like,
You didn't hold a meeting.
No, not at all. It was like, so what do you think? And people by and large, no one really realised. And they were like, yeah, I mean, if you feel awful about it, shave it off. No one cares, but we care if you feel awful about it. And my wife, you know, she's an angel. She wouldn't have cared anyway. So I sat her and I said, just watch one of these videos with me.
Okay,
I
yeah,
want to watch
good.
it.
Yeah.
And then afterwards I said, this is exactly what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And she was like, really? I never realised. Oh my God, just get rid of it. If it's bothering you, just get rid of it. I don't care. She said that. So I found that when I did start talking to people, nobody cared, and they all said, yes, do it.
Yeah.
But, you know, they hadn't really realised. So it was kind of, I think it was kind of like, you know, the odd person would say, "Oh no, you should hang on to that." But then I'd say, "Well, actually, the reason I want to get rid of it is, you know,
That's
this, and
good.
this."
Yeah,
And they're like, "Oh, right. Well, yeah, that makes sense. You should do it then."
that's good.
Like, nobody, once you had said, "Actually, this really makes me feel really bad about
Mm-mm.
myself," was saying you should keep it.
Yeah.
So
So that helped,
it,
right?
it helped a lot.
Yeah.
But I never would have thought to do it if I hadn't like watched, you know, those
Okay.
videos and stuff. So
I'm really happy that you mentioned just because I say it's a difficult thing to just kind of say, you know, or just like um to talk about in a sense like, oh, I feel insecure
mm,
that I'm losing my hair. You know, it's like how do you when does that come up? You know, when do you decide, oh, I'm going to go and tell you this now? Whenever it comes up. So I'm glad you said about the videos because I think that's a good little tip for people because like you said, a lot of the stories these guys are that, you know, it's the same kind of routine, the same worries, the same fears. And so yeah, like if you not really sure like how to explain it, literally just like watch this. That's how I
mm,
feel, you know, and it pretty much explains all, doesn't it? Well,
yeah,
the other person's kind of explaining it for you in a sense. So I'm really glad that you said that. I think it's a helpful tip for anyone who's watching or in the same situation. You know, if you don't know how to talk about it or whatever, just stick one of the videos on and say to the whoever you want to talk to it about, just like, oh, watch this. Like, this is kind of what I'm dealing with. So I'm really pleased that you said that. When you decided, like, okay, I think I've had enough now. Like, I'm just gonna do it. Did you set like a date or oh, your birthday, right? You said your birthday.
yeah, I did, and I sort of I find quite a lot of decisions much easier to sort of go through when one if the decision's sort of like made.
Right.
So it's like, you know,
You weren't on the fence.
no, I wasn't on the fence. I was like, I know it needed to happen, and all the reasons were sort of there, and I wanted to be done with it. But I sort of like, okay, well, I'll do it on my birthday, and then it was almost like the decision on the day. The decision was already made, so
Mm.
I didn't really have to do anything except go upstairs after breakfast and shave my head and come down. Um, so that made it quite easy for me setting like a date rather than having to like get to the point on the day when I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do it
Yeah.
now. So almost like I didn't really have to decide.
Talk
It's just
me
done.
talk me through that morning then. So
Oh. Yeah,
did you went out and bought some clippers or do you have some
I
lying
did.
around?
I didn't have any lying around, so I sort of made a bit of a thing about it. I think it was in between the lockdowns. You know,
Okay.
when you could see some people outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my cousin, he came around and he'd camped in the garden.
Awesome. Yeah.
And after breakfast,
This
like,
cousin sounds like a good
yeah,
bloke.
he's always been my best friend
Yeah.
all my life. So he was around anyway. We usually have a barbecue on my birthday. And you know, not many people could come, so he came.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had a morning coffee, and then I took a beer, and just got them done. And I'd sort of bought these. I think the wall balding clippers.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Great. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'm gonna just go for it, right? Like get it all off rather than let's do a 3 and see. But
Yeah.
I sort of went 3, 2, 1 because I wanted to take a picture to demonstrate to people. Look, actually, yeah, I can't keep a 3 because look at the
Yeah.
patterns here.
Yeah.
So it was almost like proof that actually, yes, I am thinning here. Look at this. But then yeah, I got it off. Oh, and the thing that nobody's ever said, which that first shave, when you get in the shower afterwards, it was like electricity. It was the first time the water had ever hit my scalp, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
oh, it was amazing. If I'd known that it wouldn't be like that every time, I would have stayed in there till the hot water ran out.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was amazing, that first shower. And yeah, and then I went back downstairs, and like I said, I actually hated it. So but it was good because actually there was a lot of distraction. You know, there was some beers around
around
and there
and
was
that,
a
yeah.
barbecue, so I didn't really think about it an awful lot on the day. But then obviously afterwards, then I was like, actually, you know, I don't like this at all.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about that. So obviously we had a couple of emails back and forth, and I remember reading this, and you know we obviously, yeah, like I said, replied to those and had a little chat there. And I've touched on this on the channel in a few different videos recently because I think it's an important thing to like talk about and to mention, you know, because it's all well and good for me to show guys who are like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever done in my life. And there are moments that it feels like that, but then there's still like work to be done afterwards. And we touched on that before, like you said, even now, like when you went to the wedding and stuff, it's not a case of like, I can't do this, but it's just thoughts, like, this is awkward maybe, or like those first interactions people haven't seen for a while. And I've had guys recently who, there was a guy, Graham, on the channel up in Scotland, and he did it and he hated it. Like the hats went on, which is like almost worse than just the routines before. Like after you've shaved it, the hats went on. Didn't want to see anyone. Like it was lockdown as well, so didn't see his parents. So like he didn't get past those like awkward, like, oh, I've done this, and it just like built and built and built to a thing where he just like didn't want to like show anyone, and it was a whole ordeal. And I think it's important to touch on that because it is a bit of a process, for a lot of people, because it's totally different. It's weird. It's like, oh, you feel excited to commit to it, and then when you do, you're like, oh wow, this is really it now, is it? And it's quite a big thing. So yeah, let's touch a little bit more on that for yourself, in a sense of like slowly getting more comfortable with it, I guess.
Yeah, the process is exactly what I was going to say. I was sort of expecting, after watching the videos, I was like, oh, because most of the guys on your channel at that point were saying, yeah, I did it, and it was just like such a weight off my back sort of thing. And I was sort of expecting that, and it didn't happen. I was like, oh. But I sort of knew that I'd done the right thing because, like, you'd go swimming, and you don't want to put your head underwater, or you... all those, those little things that we sort of talked about. And I was like, all right, I know that's bad, right? So I don't want to go back there. But it definitely took some sort of getting used to and some working on. And I sort of thought, well, once I get used to seeing myself, like, once I recognize myself a bit more without the hair, maybe then I won't care. So I sort of just really kind of dived into all of that, and I let everybody see it, and I got on, like, when I'm at work and stuff, obviously at home, well, not obviously, but when I'm at home and working, make sure the cameras are on and stuff like that, so everybody could see.
Cool.
And I just wanted to like get past that sort of hump. But it took a while, and I'm not entirely sure why that was, and I think it took. I think I emailed you at some point and said, "This isn't working for me at the moment. Have you got any more advice?" And it was almost like your reply was like, "Take a bit of a look at yourself." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's kind of what I needed." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay. Like, look, nobody cares about this. It's just you." And I sort of committed almost to like, just get over this. Like, and it had been like a year by that point, so it had been quite a while, and I was sort of used to it, and I started seeing some of the the benefits, which are really great. And it was like, my wife, she doesn't wear a lot of makeup, but I'd be waiting to go out of the house, and she'd be putting makeup on. I'm like, well, you were just going on like a dog walk. What you don't need this. And almost like one of those sort of, like if you're going thin and you put a hat, you can't go out without a hat on. And I was like, man, I don't have to do that anymore. Isn't that great? And, then it leads to other things like, well, what sort of shaving foam do I want to use on my head? Do I want to use a razor? Do I want to use a buzz thing? And that was quite a nice sort of process to think about and go through as well. But I think once I started really thinking about the sort of reasons that I wasn't getting over it that fast, and actually, I think I probably have a tendency not to like that many photos of myself anyway. So I'm like, actually, you know what? This isn't about the hair. This is something else going on. And then once I sort of addressed that, I was like, okay, then it's really started getting easier. So since that sort of, I guess, July just gone to now, so what's that, 3-4 months? That's for me when it sort of started really easing off.
Started to click, yeah.
Yeah, and I sort of had to make quite a mental like commitment to it, rather than it didn't just sort of happen.
Yeah.
But once I did, then it definitely started getting easier.
Yeah.
I saw some of my school friends a week ago. I'm still friends with my school friends, and none of them cared, and I felt so much better about it. As soon as everybody's kind of seen it once, it's like not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I can't really remember what I looked like with hair.
No.
Anymore. It's just, this is it now, and I think once everybody's seen it, and once I got out and made sure that everybody had seen it, that it definitely got a bit easier.
You mentioned just at the start then, like you kind of knew. We'll have a top up in a minute. Do you want some of this?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. If that's all right.
you mentioned about your both grandfathers are bald, and how about your father? Was he?
Well, he's sort of bald.
So, sorry, yeah, you said he is, but not.
He said to me the other day, he's like, recently when he was last around, he's like, I don't think I'm balding, but bald.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't want to put that on him.
Yeah.
So I let it be, but I'd always thought, well, my dad's bald as well. He's got some hair around, but he keeps it short because otherwise it would look silly.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. And the point I was just alluding to was there ever no, thank you, cheers. Was there ever a point where you felt like, oh, this is unfair, or why, like I've got colleagues and their hair's perfect, and why am I dealing with this and my friends aren't?
A little bit,
Yeah,
but not like a sort of where was me thing. Is out of like this group of school friends, for instance, and my cousin, I'm actually like in a real minority. Like I only know about one other person in my sort of close group of friends who's losing their hair or lost their hair. Like everyone from school has got a fine hairline, like nice thick head of hair. Like fuckers, but sorry,
that's all right.
But and my cousin's the same, and most of my other friends are the same. So I'm definitely in a minority, and occasionally it's been like made me think, well, should I just keep it for a bit longer until like I really have no option?
Yeah.
And I think that's what I was sort of thinking about yesterday when I turned up at this wedding. Like, sort of a little bit of comfort in that there are other people around you maybe that don't have hair, but certainly not on the table I was on. And actually, once you've got past that and you're there and everybody's seen you, that's okay. But I never really felt like why me and all that sort of thing, because I'm fortunate in lots of ways, and I think it's something that gets said a lot on some of your videos is focus on the other things, like that this is so unimportant in the grand scheme of things, so unimportant. I mean, you look at what's going on in Afghanistan right now. I mean, you don't even have to go nearly that far, but I'm so fortunate in so many ways that I really didn't want to get hung up on this. I felt it would have been really like almost self-indulgent to feel sorry for myself when I'm so lucky in so many ways.
Yeah, and like you said, like comparing it to far off things like Afghanistan and stuff like that, which, side note, that was something recently that was, I tried to avoid the news, but that was something that as someone who was planning to join the army, and I used to live in Plymouth, so you're walking around and you see so many people with limbs missing and stuff, and that was something that hit, I was just like, this is so bad. But anyway, we can talk about that later maybe. I totally lost train of thought, but I was going to mention you even things with yourself, like actually, when you say this feels unfair, or why am I experiencing this, but actually you're like, well, everyone has so much good stuff, like so much, and that is on the list of 10 things that you mentioned earlier. That's probably the most important point on there. I don't know what it is about the human psyche, but you get this one negativity bias, right? You have this one hang up, and suddenly that is the complete focus of everything. It can get that way. But actually, when you take a step back, this is something that I've been really like reading so much on, and because I think it's such an important part of it. When you take a step back and you kind of like think logically, like we said earlier, and you're like, actually, hang on a minute, like, what makes me, like, what am I made up of, and there's like countless things. You could even say like, oh, like my feet are average. I don't have tiny little like not hobbits have massive feet, don't they? Tiny little like trotters for feet, or if you want to be that kind of like dissecting on how we're built, and just so many things. And I think that's such an important step, when you're either thinking about, when you're just even losing your hair and you're thinking this is terrible, just to take a step back and actually be like, actually, hang on a minute, like, let's try and think about this a little bit more logically. Totally lost my train of thought or where I was going with that point, but it's an important point to make.
Yeah, it is. And I think one of the things that sort of surprised me was, because I'd never looked at like bald guys and thought that looks bad. Like the only time I maybe ever thought like your hair looks bad is like a really awful comb over or something like that.
Yeah.
I was surprised it bothered me as much as it did, because
Yeah.
I never was worried before the having to actually shave my head. I was never worried about it,
Yeah.
like ending up that way one day. I think I had a tendency to be like, oh, maybe if I was 40, that would be all right. But
Yeah.
I don't think it would have been any better there. You've got some really young dudes like
Yeah,
going
like
through this.
18, 19,
And,
yeah.
and when even when you look at it like that, I'm like, yeah, I did okay, and
Yeah,
that's okay.
good
And
innings.
this is not unusual,
No.
So what? I'm like a 36-year-old man, and my hair is thinning. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a massive thing. Sorry to cut you off there, but a massive thing that with doing all of this is probably the main like objective, but at this point is to try and just be like, this is so like unbelievably. I'm surprised that it is even a thing, because with the amount of guys that are gonna like experience thinning hair, losing your hair, thinning out, whatever. Like it's a surprise that it is such a shock to people, you know. And I've talked about it before, but when you sort of think like, oh my goodness me, my hair's thinning out like as well, it should almost be like the reverse, like, oh, you're not going thin, like, oh, that's weird, like, because it's just so unbelievably common. The point I was going to make earlier when I asked you about like, oh, feeling unfair, I felt like that when it first kind of was happening. I was like looking at other guys in my class at university and things, guys that were, I was 25, 26, guys that were in their mid 30s as well, even older, with like solid hair, thinking like, is this a joke? Like these guys have got perfect hair and I'm over here like this. But I recently went on Facebook for the first time in about 8 years, 9 years, and I was just randomly like looking through like old friends, and there was a lot of people that I actually went to that were in my school, let's say, that were now going thin and stuff like that, and that point hit home again. I was just like, wow, there's so many people that this is gonna happen. It's a surprise that it is such a surprise when it does happen. But again, I think it's because it's such a secret thing, isn't it? We talked about conversation and that earlier, but if you look at everything that the kind of narrative on how you should deal with hair loss at the moment is all like about covering it up, whether that's like verbally or things to use, isn't it? Like styles, it's all about covering it up.
Yeah, and it really shouldn't be, because I think intellectually people know that it doesn't matter, but going through it is something else. And it, like, because I watch your channel still, it annoys me when the adverts on like YouTube come up with hair loss like treatments. I'm like, I don't want that. What are you doing advertising here? I don't need that. Because it's just so unimportant. I think I found that once I finally sort of was able to feel that way, it's just got so much easier.
Yeah.
But it definitely was difficult actually getting there. Like I said, I was surprised it was difficult, but it was.
Yeah.
And
it's very real.
But I'm sort of there largely now. Like I was
in
again,
a very
I was
different
surprised
space
yesterday, right? That it bothered me, right? That I was like, oh my god, is there going to be anyone else who's bald? Almost like I was worried for my wife. Like, is anybody going to think, oh, she's got a bald husband, sort of thing? Nobody cares, right? Like nobody cares. And I think if you can keep that in your mind and like feel that, then for me that's sort of been the big thing is being able to feel that rather than just sort of know it.
Yeah, remember, like everyone's at that was going to that wedding or in the street has their hang-ups and their things. One of the things that surprised me when you said about dog walking and things like that, you go into town, obviously it would be Southampton for me, and going to town seems to be this thing, like, because I rarely go, right? I rarely do much shopping or anything like that, but people kind of do themselves up just to like go to the shops and be out in public like that, and I think that's another reminder, like everyone is like, the person who's walking towards you that you're thinking like, oh, are they looking at my hairline or whatever, is thinking like, oh, like my skin's bad today, or like, oh, why am I wearing this top, like I look fat in it or whatever, like everyone is doing that internal dialogue. You talked about those adverts, and I want to touch on that as well. I wish I had control over which ones I could turn on and off, but unfortunately I have to finance it somehow. But this is and I've got a video coming out in a couple of days, hopefully. A thing called the Adonis complex. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Right. So have you read the book
No.
titled The Adonis? Really, really. I should have brought it. I've got an extra copy, but really recommend that one. And it talks a lot about the media and how things have changed in that regard, and now more than ever, like men feeling more and more insecure, like women have had to deal with over the last few decades. But I think the women's space, even for the last like 10 years, 5 years, they've really started to like push back on it and say like, this is bollocks. Like,
Yeah.
why I don't want to go into a shop and like be plastered with this like perfect ideal. Like, I can't relate to that, and I think women did a lot in speaking up against that. But it seems like companies now have realised, and again, that book and that research about the Adonis complex is about 10 years old as well, I think, and it focuses on like muscle dysmorphia and things like that, but it talks about other insecurities like hair loss and stuff. Obviously, these companies and whatnot, the media, were missing out on 50% of the population by not, putting more emphasis on the ideal like male physique or male appearance, right? So where are you with that? Where are you in your thoughts on that sort of thing? I think it's the book alludes to two things. It's talking about, they reference like kids' toys, and I think Barbie was another thing, right? But they look at like, if you look at a kid's toy from the 1970s and it's just like a little stick man, and then like 30 years later he's like roided, just like hench. And even in like movies and stuff like that, when you talk about hair or height and stuff like that, let's start there. So yeah, tell me what you know about the Adonis complex and your thoughts on that.
I think I don't want to like pretend to know how and why it's come about. Maybe guys have always felt like bad going through this, but you sort of weren't allowed to show it. I think there's a really good movement about talking about feelings and whatnot now, and I think maybe it's just a result of guys feeling like they can talk a bit more about it. I don't know, because obviously I wasn't around 50 years ago, but I think that sort of like relates to, it makes me think of the thing that I'm most grateful, like genuinely grateful about this is, I've got a son, a little toddler son, and another one about to arrive any day, and I'm so glad that I've gone through this now rather than when they're going to be old enough to remember, because I'm definitely going to teach them that it doesn't matter what you look like, right? Yeah. Because even if I don't always practice it, I definitely believe it. We all love the same, we all worry the same, and essentially we're just all, I believe, we're just all human beings. And what sort of lesson would it be if I was saying it really doesn't matter, like beauty is on the inside, blah, 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 if I was then losing my hair and they were watching me be insecure about it, like it wouldn't be a lesson at all. And
Dad, I thought it didn't matter.
Exactly, right? And they would pick up on that, kids are smart, right? Yeah. And so that's the thing that I'm most glad about. And whatever has shaped this insecurity in my head is, I'm glad that I'm sort of conscious of it in a way and have been forced to go through it so that I can help hopefully prevent my sons having to go through that. Yeah. So I'm really glad of that, and hopefully having gone through it I can make sure or be in a position to make sure that they don't go through it.
Yeah, it's interesting when you get to this point and you're almost like thankful for the experience, for that experience of feeling kind of a bit insecure at times and things like that, and then having the resolve and kind of figuring out like, okay, I need to kind of, and having that kind of like internal dialogue and stuff to be like, right, come on, like get through this, it's fine. And you learn a lot, don't you? I think you learn quite a lot about yourself when you come out the other side.
Yeah, I am genuinely grateful for having gone through it. If I had to go through it, I'm very grateful it's now, or not, or even not earlier. So I think that's going to help, and it definitely it's a useful tool, like learning to go through something like that. But I think particularly just learning to like talk about it and realizing that this is part of the shared human condition, right? There are so many guys going through it, and they all, by and large, the things that there are so many things that everybody feels like, and that's sort of why those first videos, those videos that I came across, they just like spoke to me. It's like, oh my god, this is like these guys are articulating everything I feel and just didn't have like an outlet for. And I think that going through the process of talking about it and dealing with it is really useful. Sure, I mean, would I rather have a full head of hair? Yeah, I think I'd probably rather have a full head of hair, but I don't care any more that I don't. And it's definitely taught me some useful lessons, and I am glad for that.
Yeah, like maybe life would have been just easier if it had never been a thing or whatever. But I think gone through it, feeling like actually it was kind of a useful learning experience.
Yeah. Definitely.
When all was said and done. Yeah, no, I was completely the same. I can relate. And I'm sure a lot of guys listening to this can on so many levels because, you know, when you figure it out, like, what am I going to do about that? You know, what am I going to do about this? I think the biggest question to ask yourself when you're going through it is like, where is this going? You know, on the current path that I'm on with my routines or maybe some of the products and things, like, where does this end, or how is this gonna, like, how far do I go with this? You know, do I want to really go down the path, or do I need to like change things up and really think about this? And it's a very useful kind of time to learn about yourself. You know, that's what I'm getting at. I want to talk just really quickly a bit more about the kind of industry, and I've had to be careful about this, or not careful, but I've had to think about this because I don't want guys as well to look at the videos or how people look with the various like levels of thinning hair. Because when I shaved mine off, I still had a really decent amount of hair compared to what other guys might think, and it's really individual in that sense of like it isn't at all about how much hair or what it looks like. And I don't want to send the message to people out that, and a guy actually mentioned this exact thing of saying like, thinning hair is bad or a slightly receded hairline is bad. Like, there's nothing bad. It's not a point of like you need to shave it off when it looks a certain way, you know, because it really isn't about that. And I have so much respect for the guys who really just kind of like take it all in their stride, and they're actually already in tune with like, yeah, I'm a guy like who's thinning out, like that happens, you know. So much respect for people who can kind of think like that early on. And I think the problem that I have with a lot of the products and stuff that are out there that are marketed towards like helping you with the problem is they push the narrative of it's inherently bad to have thinning hair, or look like you have thinning hair, or look like you're going bald, look like you have a receding hairline. They all push that narrative, you know, of like losing your hair equals bad, this product can stop you looking like that or whatever. And it kind of, I think that is what is a big part of what has happened. It then teaches you to think like, my hair falling out is a bad thing. It looks bad or it's unattractive and things like that. And that's the problem that I have with that stuff. This thing that is kind of sold as the antidote to the thinning hair. It just encourages the narrative of it's bad to have thinning hair. But if you really think about it, what is so bad about it, you know?
Yeah, I definitely get that, and it's, I mean, it's a big industry, isn't it? And you know, in the ideal world, you wouldn't get industries or people trying to earn money off other people's insecurities. Or like, you know, you were saying before, like actually creating an insecurity where there wasn't one before, or may not have been one before, 50 years ago or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And that's not a good behavior to have as a like, or you know, be a part of if you work in that industry. It's not a good way to earn money, is it?
No.
But I think the shame is that, and so you were saying like about, you know, some people would say you've got loads of hair, why are you shaving it? Or some people are like have really thin hair and don't care, you know. I think the shame is that people can't just leave you to your own devices. I think what it illustrates is that everybody's on like a different journey, and there may be things that are in common with all of that and the way you feel about them. But I think it doesn't matter what you do with your hair as long as you're happy about it. And I think if we, you know, as a collective could get to that point, that's much better. Because you're right, it's like this is a solution. but it's not for everybody,
Yeah.
because everybody's different, right? You know, there is a group of people who feel like this would be the best option for them, and I'm a part of that, and you're part of that, and
Yeah.
that's okay. But if you don't want to do that, that's also okay. The important thing is that we feel okay about ourselves, I think.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult thing to do, especially like you say, you've got these industries targeting people's insecurities, which isn't very nice. It's not very fair, but it is a fact of our life, certainly at the moment. And if we can do a little bit of something to help people realize that actually, you know, that just doesn't matter. Just try and be a better person and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Then it's okay, you know. Because I was the same, you know. I had quite a full head of hair, relatively. You know, when I did do it, I just wanted to get ahead of that, and I kind of, for me, I wanted to put it to bed and move on, because I knew that it wasn't important. I knew it was coming. I was okay with that. I just wanted it out of the way. But if you don't need to go through that, that's okay. You know, like not my dad or both my grandpas.
Yeah.
They didn't shave their head.
Yeah, no.
Then they didn't care.
Yeah.
And that's great. But for me, I needed to go through that, and I need to keep my hair this way, or my lack of hair this way.
Yeah.
And that works for me, and that's okay. And if we could just, I think the world would be a bit better if we could just leave people to get on with their own thing.
Yeah, and just, I don't know, just see it. If I can help make it just less of a thing, like, you know, then I think my work is good. But no, you mentioned it not being a thing for some people. I went to go and see a good friend of mine that I used to work with, and even 6, 7, well, no, it was about 9 years ago when I worked with him, 8 years ago, and he was already like, his hair loss is like really slow, and he gets his hair cut normally, and it's not even on his radar, you know. He's just like, yeah, like, I'm losing my hair, like, it is what it is. And it's great, like, that's how it should be, really. But for me, that with the whole shaved head thing, that I've kind of come to realize, like, and this has taken me time to kind of realize that. I just think wherever you want to be at, or, you know, whether you want to use the product or you want to get the hair transplant, whatever, just but be that. So, like, if you want to wear a wig or a hair system, whatever you want to call it, then be the guy that is wearing that and looks great, but don't use it to kind of hide the fact that you're a guy who is losing his hair and wearing the wig. I just think ultimately you'll be so much more comfortable, like, being that and not using it to hide, you know what I mean? So I'm a guy who's lost his hair, and the best haircut for me to have in terms of, like, ease, and I think looks the best, is to shave my head. You know, that's what I am, that's who I am, you know. But again, with things like I had a message the other day from some guy who wanted me to help push a product that he's developed, and it was like, you know, SMP, right, where you get it tattooed. It was that, but like non-permanent. So it was like this. It was like a pen, like a permanent pen, with like loads of dots on it, and you basically just like do it yourself, like, every day. And I was like, okay, but then you're like, where are you? Like, if you use that, okay, cool, but then what is your truth, sort of thing, you know? Because then you're not but if you want to be the guy who's shaved his head and uses that so it looks like it got a full head of hair, like, be that guy. Like, if someone asks you about it, or, you know, because you're not, there's nothing, and there's absolutely nothing to hide if you're doing that. But if you're kind of using that to hide, you know, the fact that you're using your hair, there's always going to be that monkey on your back, you know, the elephant in the room, and that's never a comfortable space to be in. I think in the whole, like, wherever you're at on the spectrum, or which area of hair loss you're at, you know, if you've always got something like that to hide, then you can never be fully comfortable with it.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
No, I totally agree. And I sort of see, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I sort of see, for me, your channel is a way of helping people get comfortable with themselves, not about treating hair loss.
Yeah.
Look what I did, you know, treating hair loss. You
Yeah.
know, we've been so conditioned, like you say, to think it's bad, but I see it as more of you're helping people get comfortable with whatever their situation is, and this is just one option, right?
Yeah.
There's just one option, and I think it's a shame when people have to cover it up. From my perspective and the way I have experienced it, I think it would be a shame, because it takes quite a lot of mental energy, and hopefully, if you go through this and you shave your head, that can be a thing of the past, and then you can move on, rather than, yeah, it might look really good, you know, that pen thing or whatever it was, and any of these things, but you're spending so much emotional energy and time thinking about this stuff
Yeah.
that you don't need to. And that for me was the big
That's
thing
a
that I
good point.
didn't want. I didn't want to be having to think about this
Yeah.
stuff. I just wanted to be done with it and move on.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that was the key thing for me is I didn't want a solution, quote
Yeah.
unquote. I didn't want treatment. That was never going to be a thing for me.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get comfortable with my situation and who I am.
The mental energy thing is such a good point. It's such a big thing. Yeah, when you're, I guess where you were at and where I was at, where your hair's going, you're doing various things to kind of manage that situation at the time. It sounds like we were kind of similar in the sense of like styling, and I was just like really preoccupied with it. That's like I was neither here nor there. Like I wasn't committed in either direction, and so yeah, I was spending a lot of time, and it sounds like you were worrying about it, thinking about it, and that takes away from a lot of other areas that you could be
Yeah.
benefiting it in. A lot of energy that could be better spent elsewhere, right? And so you made the decision to just like commit in a sense, right? Like it's going this way. Let's just do it now.
Mm.
And I was the same. And then you are the guy who is losing his hair and shaves his head, and once you kind of sounds so strange. Once you identify as that, you know, that's your truth. Like you're not hiding anything. That's just who you
Mhm.
are, and you're on.
Yeah.
And I think wherever you're at with it, yeah, that's what the kind of place you want to get to. And no, I get a lot of messages actually from guys who they're like, I really like your content that you're like kind of talking about this stuff. Oh, I've decided to take this, or I'm using this at the moment, but you like hearing other people talk about it and you kind of like open up the dialogue about it has just made me feel loads better to know that when all's said and done, like if I do actually, despite using this stuff, whatever, I do kind of lose my hair, it's actually fine, and that's great. I'm really happy to be able to do that. It's never been a thing of like, you can't do this or you
Mm.
shouldn't be doing that. Um, Ultimately, I think long term, and I think a lot of experts and things like this will agree. Like if you want to go down the route of like, I got to hold on to this like at all costs, just kind of know like what you're getting into in a sense, because it's not like how it's painted out of just like, oh, just do this one thing once a day and you can totally forget about it. I've spoken to enough people who have gone down that route to know like it's not quite as rosy as how
Yeah.
they kind of outline it. But be that guy, like be the guy who I'm going to do whatever I can but like get in touch with the reality of it. Still know that you are losing your hair. You're using this stuff to like try and slow it down or whatever, right? I don't want to get too specific, but you're still losing your hair. And if you can get in, yeah, like I can't remember the exact wording that you used earlier, but if you can get comfortable with that and accept that, you're gonna have a way better journey with it. Rather than like not I don't know, not being in touch with reality or whatever.
Yeah.
Like hiding from that.
Yeah, I think so. I think if that's what you want to do, that's okay. Far be it for me to tell you that you're doing the
Mm,
wrong
mm.
thing, because I don't know what it's like for you, but I can't help but feel like if you didn't care, which presumably you must care if you're doing these things to try and hide it, as it were, then you must care, right? And presumably if you can get to a point where you don't care, you'll be happier and therefore healthier.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what it was. It was definitely about, like you say, get comfortable with this. This is the reality, because I don't want to think about this because it's so unimportant
Mm,
and nobody cares. I'm like the only person who cares about this.
mm.
I don't want to care about this, and I felt like, because these like behaviors for me, like the hair and the covering it up, they sort of crept up on me. I didn't realize I was doing it until
Mm.
I saw one of your videos. I didn't. I genuinely didn't really realize that my routine had gone from like 5 minutes to 10 minutes to 15 to 20 minutes, sort of, in the morning. Just for example, I don't want to do that, and so for me, just yeah, that's why I sort of feel like you're helping people get comfortable with
Yeah.
whatever their
No, I'm
path
glad you said
is.
that. Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. Have you I mean, have you ever had any like either before or after like any experiences with like other insecurities at all that this hair kind of journey has made you reflect on?
Yeah, but I don't think anything unusual.
No.
I think we're all. I think we're probably all wrapped up a bit in appearances
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. But I've certainly not let it drive behaviors.
Yeah.
I don't think I have. So that I think that's probably why I was so keen to deal with this one.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like it in myself. I didn't like, once I realized I didn't like seeing myself do these things and spend this time and energy on these things that just didn't matter. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to try and get rid of that and move on.
Yeah. Is there something that stands out for you in your kind of timeline of this stuff that has helped you significantly that maybe other people can implement or think about to get more comfortable with the situation themselves? Is there something that was like really kind of changed your thought process on it? Or
Well, I think there were the two things. The first was seeing one of your videos and be like, this is going on for so many people. I'm not unique. I don't know why I would have thought I was unique, but everybody is feeling exactly the same thing.
did you think like, oh, why am I struggling with this so
No,
much?
I didn't think about it. Like I
Okay.
said, I hadn't really thought it. It crept up on me, and I'm like, oh my, what am I doing? I'm
Right.
doing all these things to, like, what do you call them, like safety behaviors or
Safety
something?
behaviours,
I'm
yeah.
doing all these things, and I hadn't even realised, and I must therefore be spending all this time in it. And once I realised, I was like, this is really bad. This has got to go. And that was a big one for me. And then the second one was when I emailed you again, and I said, this isn't getting any better for me. Have you got any advice for people who don't love it straight away? And
Yeah.
then you were like, see if there's something else going on. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe there's something else going on. And there was nothing specific. It's not like I was really, like you say, insecure about anything else particularly.
No.
But it forced me to have a think about why I cared so much.
Yeah.
And that's sort of when my feelings about going bald sort of married up with my what I logically knew to be true about it. And when those sorts of that came together like that was sort of the second one for me, when I was like, okay, I feel a lot better about this now.
Yeah.
Like, and I could sort of see there was, I wasn't necessarily totally there at that stage, but I could see, right, there's light at the end of the tunnel here. And then once I'd sort of got used to that and moved past that, I think, I'm like I said, I'm not there 100% of the time, but I don't think about it really anymore, and I think that's a good place to be. Just not to have to think about it.
Yeah.
For me, that's a good place to be.
Yeah, definitely. No, the things that just quickly, just to expand a little bit, I think it sounds like that kind of introspection, right? And thinking, like, again, logically, for the people that might be listening or watching this, I think, and again, like, some things are manageable for some people. So some people might be having, like, I'm styling my hair differently, or I'm going to the barbers and I'm asking for, can you do something here? Not, I want this haircut, more like, can you do something? So it's like you're getting a haircut that isn't what you want, but it's what you feel like you need, sort of thing. And for some people, maybe just, think about and write them down, like literally write them down, what you're doing to kind of manage it. And if you feel like, that's not so bad, like, keep going, like, do your thing. But for some people, I think that's quite a wake-up call, when both what are you doing and how much time you're spending doing it. And another guy who's been on the channel before, Dane, he mentioned that to me. He said, I made the decision to do something about it when I took around a bit of paper and a pen with me, and every time I thought about it or worried about it, I would, like, tally it up. And at the end of the day, I looked at this tally and I thought, I can't keep wasting, like, my days doing this, and that was, and little things like that, I think, help give people a different perspective on it, right? And so that was the first thing. And just looking internally, like, what other things, I can't remember my exact wording for you, but I usually say to guys when they say, like, look, this is not what I thought it would be or whatever. And, like, for you, like, you've got so much going on outside of the hair, like you said, with the work and the family and everything like that. And it literally just sitting down and being like, oh, like, hang on a minute, like, life's actually not bad at all. Like there's actually so much good stuff, and it could literally be as simple as that for some people, and that sets them on the right path, you know.
Yeah, that's definitely what it was for me. It's like, I guess you provided both of my wake-up calls.
Yeah, just like a little like turning of the head in the right direction is essentially what it is.
Yeah, definitely, and they both came from you, so thank you.
Thank you.
I've nothing but thanks for that.
Yeah, no, Max, thank you. I mean, this has been a pleasure. I feel like that's a good place to kind of wrap this up. So, guys, thank you for watching and listening. I'll look at that one to this new episode of the podcast. You know, first one here in this camper van. The traveling podcast. It could turn into something cool. Let us know if things you want to hear us talk about or in future episodes. And it's a pleasure as always. I think most importantly, just literally having this conversation, talking about it is really useful. So cheers, Max.
No, thank you. Genuinely, thank you.
We'll see you soon.